Multiculturalism is a really interesting word because it's become a catchphrase. It's almost something that doesn't mean anything anymore. It means so many things that it doesn't mean anything. And it didn't begin that way. Really, when you first saw artists beginning to use the word multiculture, it was the early 70s, it was the late 60s and the early 70s. And they were trying to express that America was able to contain people from all kinds of different cultures. Because previous to that, it was thought that if you were going to have a nation, you had to have a unitary culture, that you had only one way of being. And if you weren't going to be this kind of way or assimilate to that kind of way, that there was no place for you under the sun. So multicultural really began as a radical idea in that sense in the 60s and the 70s. And by the 80s and the 90s, it had unleashed a backlash from a lot of folks who felt like, no, America's one way or the highway. And if you're not gonna assimilate, if you're not gonna sort of live the way that we want you to live, that there's really no place for you here. But what you found happening, I think, was that demographics changed. Kids would grow up together and hang out and forge these different types of activities together. One of them was called hip hop. It ended up being a really great way for folks to be able to understand each other. And through that, that old idea that there was only one way to be an American began to recede. And businesses picked up on the idea. Businesses began to see the importance, literally, of having different kinds of backgrounds represented in their advertising, in their appeals, and government as well began to see this. And I think right now where we're at is multiculturalism is pretty much everywhere, but it's also something that's become so diffuse that we're not really even sure what it means anymore. And so that brings us to the point where we're at today, which is that we're sort of in this paradoxical moment. On the one hand, there's more cultural desegregation than we've ever seen before, but on the other, we are resegregating in our homes, in our schools, even in our social lives. And that feels like we're going backwards 50 years. So in a lot of ways, I'd like to call attention to these kinds of paradoxes and to help us kind of think through, have these conversations about what it means for us to be moving towards a truly multicultural society.